Chapter 1. Too Emotional to Drive. "You should feel lucky you still have a job," Listener mocked, her hands clutching at the steering wheel. "Yeah? Well, you could have fucking fooled me," she gave a shout to let out frustration, which then turned to a sob. "What about the fucking clients, you fucking asshole?" she whined. "What about poor Shania? Does she even know that we all got fired?" She didn't think so. After all, Shania hadn't been on the conference call that had gone out to a group of more senior employees being told that due to the circumstances, they were having to furlough some employees. Furlough was all fine and dandy. Collect unemployment until they get straightened out and then go back to work. But no. The email she and the longer employed, higher paid employees got said that they were being terminated. Not only that, but they were classified in some way that prevented them from qualifying for a special unemployment the government had set up for people who lost their jobs due to the disaster. And they were taking forever to put in their paperwork, so they couldn't even draw the normal unemployment. And all medical benefits were ended retroactively to the end of the month, which was the day after the call, probably to make it easier so that they didn't have them on the books at all for the month. Listener shook her head, trying to focus on where she was driving. "Fucking backstabbers," she muttered, one hand wiping the tears out of her eyes. She needed to pull over. She really wasn't in the right emotional state to be driving. She looked around, seeing nowhere to pull over at the narrow 1.5-lane road. "Shit," she muttered as she wiped her eyes again and looked around, finally seeing a small driving path off the side of the road. "Better than the middle of the road," she muttered. It seemed to be a back road, like one that forest rangers used to check on campgrounds or wildlife or whatever. Listener slowed her truck, making its way up the slight incline of the trail, glad that none of the trees were so close she had to worry about the camper on the back catching on them. She wouldn't be able to turn around, but once she got to the clearing, she'd make this turn. She really needed to take a break so she didn't crash. The last thing she wanted was to die accidentally and just be wiped from the map without a trace, to be found in a distant future by some poor, unsuspecting hikers, if ever. No one even knew she was out here. No one even knew she lost her apartment this week due to losing her other job 2 weeks ago and not being able to make ends meet. It wasn't like it was surprised that she lost her other job. It was just a small cafe that was slowly losing business, and the only other people to work there was Kelly, the owner, and her husband. She knew that they were going to be closing the doors altogether pretty soon, most likely. At least she could use the experience she got in there in real life. She couldn't even afford to buy food again. She would get another job. Right? Listener pressed the brakes gently to stop easily, not wanting to rearrange all the stuff in her cabin. She wiped her eyes again, then cursed. If the ranger, or whoever used this road to come up here, they wouldn't be able to get past her since the road was barely wide enough for her truck. Listener wiped her eyes again and sighed as she put the truck back in gear and gently started going again. It took a long time to get anywhere wider where she could pull over, or at least it seemed to take forever. But it might have only been how slowly she had to go to make sure she didn't run over anything in this overgrown jungle of a forest lit only by the late afternoon sun. Finally, she reached a place where it was widened, even seeing a rock-lined, weeded park spot next to a mostly clear patch of ground. She pulled over and parked in the space, satisfied enough to be off the road and out of the way for a moment to let her head back break down. Tears. Tears falling. Oh, the tears. She would have been ashamed of all the tears that were leaving her eyes, had anyone else been around to see it. Luckily, there wasn't anyone, and no one came through the road to tell her to move on. She hoped she wasn't trespassing on someone's property, who would shoot her on sight, or that she passed a sign saying that she missed due to her emotional state. Also, luckily, an emotional wreck woman generally had a lot of pull in the emotional department, so she could probably keep from getting in trouble as long as she didn't meet any psychopaths. After what felt like 20 minutes, but turned out to be 2 hours, she looked around, wiped her eyes on her shirt as she took in the area she had turned around in. It was really dark now. Dark enough that she knew she'd probably crash into a tree if she tried to leave right now. Well, I have to stay somewhere tonight, and here's as good a place as any, she thought. It will only be for the night anyway. She again prayed that there wasn't any shoot on sight, sign she'd missed, and got out of the truck, grabbing her flashlight and heading a bit way to relieve herself before it got too dark to see. On the way back, she nearly fell into a hole, catching herself at the last minute, and just stepping into it instead. Ash puffed around her in a cloud, a soft hazy gray in the dusty twilight. She shined her flashlight down into the pit she was standing in and let out a soft, "Huh?" It was a fire pit. It looked like it hadn't been used in a while, but camping season was just starting. She stepped back out of the hole and set her light to the ground, being more careful now. When she got to the edge of the parking spot, she saw it. A fallen sign. She picked it up to uncover it from the grass, and what she saw made her more at ease. Tent Lot 48. It was a campsite. This was great. She'd just park here. She had literally all her stuff in the cabin, so she had literally everything she needed to survive, supposedly. And she could use the bit of money she had to pay the site fee until she could find a new job in a cheap apartment. She'd registered if any ranger ever wondered to where she was, which was pretty likely, since it was probably the time the camp caregivers and rangers would be around to do maintenance on the sites for the reason. Listener checked her phone, turning it on power-saving mode so she wouldn't have to charge it so often, and checked for service. Yes! She had 3 out of 4 bars out here. She could make this work. She was going to be okay. Major setbacks were bound to happen in life, but it was all about how you handled them that made you who you were.